Let's continue to learn from Mr. Navroze Contractor as he shares with us some tips on photography, on the use of light, on the use of various apertures and shutter speeds to make an image. We are going to learn from his lifetime of experiences in the field of still photography and cinematography. Let's go over to Mr. Navroze Contractor.
Navroze, what you said was really very important, that we have to go beyond a very limited way and approach of looking at photography and photojournalism, which doesn't look at so many other aspects of life, living, art, which can enrich the way we look. So can you tell us more about what you're saying on how do we look, how do we see, how do we frame, how do we do it in a better way? I mean, as we are on this journey of learning, which can help us to be better observers and better, kind of be documenting whatever we are seeing to be able to do justice to it. How do we do that?
Well, if you want to go to the absolute basics of photography, then as I said, the most important thing is light, because without light, there is no photography, So to get the light inside your camera, we have two means. One is the aperture in the lens and one is the shutter speed. Okay. So both these things have to match to get a good exposure, what you call a good decent exposure. That is the base that it should happen. Now, when you are taking a picture, both affect your quality of your photographs. Whether you're doing it with a small aperture or whether you're doing it with a big aperture, whether you're doing it with a fast shutter speed or with a slow shutter speed, So it affects the quality of the graphic quality of your picture, nothing else. For example, if you're using a lens which is say 2.8, and that is the f-stop. F-stop is the amount of the lens opens and the light goes inside, and your shutter speed say is 1/50th of a second. So you can take, if it is f5.6 and shutter speed is 1/50th of a second, your picture will look one type. If you put your f-stop at 2.8 and your shutter speed at 100, you double it, so then the picture will look different. So the wider the lens is open, the shallower the depth of field. Okay. Now the depth of field is what is centrally in the picture and how it goes out of focus when the comes towards you and goes behind. If you want to take out, so the longer the lens, the lesser the depth of field. The shorter the lens, the wider the angle, the more the depth of field. Now, for example, the way we look at things is supposed to be at I think normally it is considered at 40 mm. If you put on a 40 mm lens on a 35 millimeter frame, is what you and I will see. And our aperture is very small, so we see everything in focus. Our eyes they are very sensitive, so our apertures are very small, so we see everything in. I'm looking at you, but your hair is in focus, your glasses are in focus, the man who is shooting me is in focus, light is in focus, your hands are in focus. But we don't want to do that we want to draw attention, say, only to your eyes. So we'll open the aperture to say 2.8, if your lens permits that, and increase the shutter speed, and it will be that everything else becomes out of focus and you as a central figure becomes in focus. Now, in technical terms, it is called selective focus. So you have a picture and you want to have focus on one thing. When you're shooting in a street, or when you were shooting many objects together, so sometimes what happens is that selective focus can go haywire. So it is better to keep smaller aperture so you get more depth of field, so that you capture more of life all in focus. Now shutter speed also affects the speed of the action of what you are photographing. So if you say want to make a boy running or a horse running, and if you pan with it and you shoot, when you move from left to right or right to left, it is called a pan. When you move from top to bottom, it is called tilt, or this way. So when somebody is running, you're shooting like this, you know. So what will happen is that if the shutter speed is low, then you will see the feet of the horse all blurred, you know. Maybe the horse, some part will be in focus and the background will be also out of focus because it is blurred. That will give you an example of speed, you know. It gives you a quality of the graphic sort of perception of speed. Otherwise, what you can do is you can increase your shutter speed very high and freeze the horse so that, you know, everything is absolutely sharp and the background is also sharp and you know what is up. So there are 2-3 ways of doing, but shutter speed and aperture are two things that you play with constantly to get the graphic quality of the picture that you want, nothing more. You know, those are the two of our tools, basic tools that we use in all kinds of work, whether it is. Now in cinema it is very different because the shutter speed is constant. You see, shutter speed is constant at 1/50th of a second if you want to do it the normal way. So everything you have to do according to the aperture. So if you are shooting in a dark area, the aperture has to open. If you are shooting in a very bright area, the aperture has to close. If it is not enough, you have to put an ND filter, neutral density filter, so the light becomes less, just enough to give you a correct exposure. Now when you practice with this a lot, then you will get used to knowing exactly what you want to do at the spur of a moment. Finally, we practice. See, it is very unfortunate that in all other arts, in visual arts, you have to do sadhana. You know, if you do not sketch for hours and hours and hours, you cannot get your drawing right. But nobody does sadhana in photography. You see, even when you are studying photography, you're always picking up a photograph or a camera when your teacher tells you, I want you to do this. When you become a professional photographer, most of them, they wait for an assignment to come, then they go and shoot. A good photographer, like a good writer, photographs something every single day of his life. So the camera is looking at things the way you want it to look at. It is an extension, it should become an extension of your eye. You know, that is the main thing. So I suggest to younger generation and to people who are practicing photography or who want to do photography, who don't want to be only a amateur photographer or a bathroom singer like that, you know. I mean, why is it so that the dancer has to dance every day, a musician has to sing every day, a tabla player has to play every single day, but we don't have to do it? It's not magic that's going to fall on us. You know, it is a very essential technique that we have to all learn. And now with digital equipment, see, when we were shooting with film, it was very difficult because film was very expensive and you take 3 or 4 pictures every day and every 3 days you need a new film and then you don't have money for it. But now it is not like that. You know, pick up your camera, keep it with you. Anytime and every time you see something that is interesting, shoot it. So that other thing that is required in photojournalism, now we are coming to photojournalism. Now, the very basic thing about photojournalism. See, I am not talking about you have to learn politics, you have to know the situation. I am not talking about all that. That will come later when you are growing up with it. But first, when you are looking at this, a photojournalist is like an anthropologist. You know, like you look at a person for a long time, you stare at them and you want to get a good picture. So you take maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pictures and maybe 3rd and 5th frame is good. You know, now when I'm talking parallelly to cinema and this both, because as a documentary photographer, because you teach film also, what happens is that you look at a person and then he sits up and he goes out of the frame. You know, then oof, you have to pan up and then half the time the frame comes here but it has to go up like this. You know, so if you observe a human being, any human being, except, let me tell you, a martial artist and a dancer, because they do movements which are unexpected for you, and you cannot anticipate. Half the fun is to see a dancer do a movement that is unanticipated. But in real life, if you go to see, if you are observing a person, before he stands up or before he moves his position, he will do something. Everyone, you, me, all of us will do something, So, for example, if I have to get up just now, I will cross my legs, I'll put myself here, so you are ready to get up with him, So, you are observing, like as if you are actually observing wildlife, and you have to stay one step ahead of them, otherwise you will miss that particular moment. Now, when you get your shutter speed and your aperture right, the third most important thing is the moment, and to capture that correct moment is where your practice and your sadhana will come into play. The third important thing why I talk about sadhana is that no photograph comes to you. You have to go to the photograph. Nobody is going to come and say that you are lying like this in bed and then tomorrow morning your assignment is ready. It's not like that. You have to go to the person. You have to go to the field. You have to go to the light. You have to go to the event. You have to make an effort to do that. That is another thing that you have to develop as a photojournalist. In that, you also have to develop etiquette. You also have to develop a certain kind of PR, that people accept you, that some people are unacceptable, and there are many photographers who are totally unacceptable, but also they have taken good pictures, But what I am saying is that generally, to be accepted amongst what you are going to shoot, whether you are going to shoot, and let us talk not about anything violent or anything dramatic, I mean, if you are shooting a situation where there is a flood and where everybody is suffering and people are trying to, then of course they are not going to look at you. You have to do your work and they have to do their work, and you have to show what, or you're in a combat situation or a riot situation. Nobody cares what you're doing. But when you're doing something, say you go to a fish market, which we'll do tomorrow, nobody can be invisible. The way I'm dressed, the way I look, and with this big camera in front of me, I'm not invisible. There were, in photojournalism, there were 3 stages in the history of photojournalism. The first one was that you are a fly on the wall. Okay? So, you are only observing, you are thinking that you are invisible. The second one was, there was a movement like that, that you are photographing everything without people knowing. You are thinking foolishly that people don't know that you are standing there, and you are shooting everything. So, it was called the fly on the wall kind of thing. The second one was cinema verite. That means that you go on and on and on shooting, and you will take out something out of that. And the third now, which we have all come to, and I practiced it when I came to know the defects of the very first one, is called living camera. Is that Navroze Contractor has come into my house, he has come with his equipment, maybe he is going to put a light here or there, and he is going to photograph my life, and I have accepted him, and I am giving him permission that you please shoot. So, that is called living camera. You understand? Huh? So, it's a very simple thing, that there are 3 phases, that you can either select this, or you can select this, or you can select this. And you have to train yourself not to be very violent in your movements, not to be too obtrusive, not to be so close that they are uncomfortable with you. If there is a tragedy, you have to stay away, because they are sharing their tragedy with you. If there is a happiness or birthday party, you shoot differently. If somebody is ill or somebody is meeting for the first time, you shoot, your attitude is a little different. And in those kind of situations also, you have to keep a little distance emotionally, because if somebody you've gone into tragedy and you break down crying yourself, that means your work is over. You have to stand up, and you can go home and cry. But at that particular moment, you are out there to do your job, So these are the things that we have to train, and we train our students like this.
Mr. Navroze Contractor has spoken to us about the importance of being sensitive and knowing when to take pictures and what pictures to take. As photojournalists, we have learnt that we must not impose ourselves on our subjects. Instead, we should be respectful and we should know what is the appropriate behavior to follow in difficult situations. We are going to continue in the next video.